This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Want to learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician? Sign up for Liner Notes, my curated email newsletter where I share the best insights and knowledge gems from these conversations, some of which have been featured here on the podcast. From marketing to songwriting to touring and sync licensing, you'll get actionable tips delivered straight to your inbox every 2 weeks. Liner Notes Insider, the deep dive edition, will feature exclusive deep dives, detailed case studies, and premium content that goes beyond the podcast interviews. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes. It's free to get started, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Welcome to episode 330 of The Unstarving Musician. I am Rabanzo. This is my podcast. How are you? Where are you? How are you feeling? What are you wearing? How's your weather? I hope it's great, and if it's not, I hope you're enjoying it anyway. Big news in the music world and my drumming world. Matt Cameron of Pearl Jam announced that he was leaving the band after 27 years. Amazing, what a career. When I first started getting into the band, they had Dallas native Dave Ebersezi playing drums with them, but obviously I know who Matt Cameron is from his Soundgarden days and all the work he's done with Pearl Jam in recent years. Well, over the years, not recent, but for most of their existence. It'll be interesting to see what happens to them. There was some rumors that Cameron would join Foo Fighters, but the industry buzz says Shane Hawkins, son of Taylor Hawkins, will fill the chair, replacing Josh Freese, who I guess was let go back in May. I didn't even know that until I started hearing about Matt Cameron and this rumor that he might join them. So anyway, I don't guess that's going to happen. We'll see. Who knows? I know Matt Cameron's going to do something again. Today I'm joined by Steve Pasieka. I gave him a little Spanish pronunciation there. I believe he says Pasieka. He is the creative force behind Skulk the Hulking, a project that pushes the boundaries of what independent music can be. Steve combines hardcore music, comedy improv, and cutting-edge AI tech to create a multimedia experience that spans music, visual art, and podcasting. When the pandemic shut down live performance, Steve transformed his entire creative approach, launching a fictional video podcast called The Many Incessant Lives and Subsequent Deaths Deserved of Skulk the Hulking, and dove deep into AI-generated visuals to do it. His work represents the kind of forward-thinking and cross-disciplinary artistry that can and probably will reshape the way indie musicians will build their careers in the future. In this conversation, Steve and I talk about how he evolved from live performance art and noise rock to creating this multimedia project that blends music, AI-generated visuals, and storytelling. We explore his background in both hardcore music and comedy improv and how these different worlds seem to inform his creative process. He offers insights on incorporating AI while maintaining creative authenticity. Steve shares specific AI tools that he uses, the communities that helped him learn, and how he harnesses the quirks and obstacles of these tools, of which there are many, to fuel his creativity. Really interesting stuff. You can find his work at skulkthehulking.com. His video podcast, is on both Spotify and YouTube, possibly some of the other platforms. I'll put a link in the show notes to the Spotify place to find it. And, well, without further ado, here is me speaking with Steve Pasieka of Skulk the Hulking. I like your guitars.
Thank you.
How's the PR thing going for you?
It's got some good things about it. We're running into a lot of pushback from media outlets about the generative AI aspect of the podcast that I'm doing. It's funny because I went into the whole generative AI thing because I thought we all need to learn a little more about it and know what exactly it is,
You would be right.
Yeah, and I find it very funny that a lot of places don't want to talk about it when it's so prevalent right now and it's not going to go away, And I think there's some positives, some negatives. There's things we need to look out for. There's things that I think it can be used for. But yeah, it's been interesting to go through. This is like probably one of the bigger PR campaigns that I've done,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. the States is very weird, I feel like, about how PR works. And I almost did PR in Europe instead, especially since my wife and I are considering moving there. She's originally from Greece. But I decided I like Andrew a lot. I think he gets the project, and he gets what it is. The States is in a very weird place right now, as I'm sure you know. And I think the fears are legitimate, but I think aiming at the tool that is currently being used to exploit and possibly oppress people, I think doesn't deal with the actual issue, which is we're a country full of people trying to oppress and exploit people, and until you take care of them, they will continue to find new tools to use.
It's frightening and depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's definitely why we have the thoughts of just cutting and running, like I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we kind of share that, you and I, or you and your wife and me and mine. We actually burned the proverbial boats and moved to Panama in 2016, and
Yeah,
then a little over 3 years ago came to Mexico, partly because the pandemic taught us an unexpected lesson about getting locked into a place so far away from where most of your friends and family are.
fair, fair.
And yeah, and I have family and familial roots in Mexico, so there were some nice things about that as well.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
here we are. But anyway, yeah, we're kind of
Where
uh,
were you where were you before Panama?
San Jose, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
for 17 years. I was born in uh, Fort Worth, Texas, and my wife and I met in Arlington, and so we
Oh,
spent
wow.
a number of years there. We actually just celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary, 31 together, to give some perspective. But
Congratulations.
thank you. I say we celebrated. We didn't get to celebrate because I had a bout of unfortunate bout of food poisoning, but the celebration is coming a week from this weekend, so we rescheduled.
Nice. I'm sure it will be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah. So I feel you. So you mentioned podcasting, just to get something clear in my head. Do you also do your own podcast, or you're just out trying to get on podcasts?
No, no, no. So the whole thing that I put out is a vodcast. So it's a
Got it.
fictional story that uses Skulk the Hulking music that I wrote, and I wrote the story with a friend. And the only part that's generative AI is the visuals to go along with the story.
Okay.
And so it's out, I have it on Spotify and YouTube, but also on the website. So it is a story, and I'm continuing to write like shorts that continue the story.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. I somehow missed that part. When you said podcasting, though, I say I missed it, but I'm like, you know what? I think I did read about the
Yeah.
podcast. I've seen some of the work, and
Hmm.
I guess I was, kind of stopped there after I checked some out. I like it, by the way. It's pretty cool, and
Nice.
and I like the story behind how you got, at least what I understand of it, how you got from where you were to here.
Yeah, yeah.
It
It's been
seems
a
like,
journey.
yeah, it seems like kind of a great pivot story, which I hope we'll talk about. And then there seemed like some cool intersections of like the music genre that you do, this kind of hardcore music, which I'm reading
Yeah.
that from my notes because I was like trying to describe the music to my wife last night. I'm like, it's kind of got like a metal voicing, but almost like a pop musicality.
I think that's fair. Like that's really what I aimed for in my music. I always liked the more aggressive stuff, but I always liked when like I my musical point was 90s, so I like when it kind of took different genres and brought it with some pop sensibility.
Mhm.
So I try to do that in what I do as well.
I know you'll get a kick out of this because whenever I hear this type of voicing or this genre of voicing, I think of the band Pantera. And
Hmm.
I went to high school with Rex and the Brothers Abbott, in
No
Arlington,
way.
Texas. Yeah, and
That's crazy.
in fact, we were friends, especially myself, especially with Rex, but and then probably Daryl, and I was acquainted with his brother Vinny or Vince as he was
Yeah,
known back
yeah.
then. So anyway, yeah,
That's
I was.
amazing.
They're kind of like the granddaddies of that sort of
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
movement. Yeah, yeah. So it's a lot of years. I can't believe it where the time went.
I
So
know.
um, what is the a quick sort of surface level question here? What's the story
Mhm.
between the Skulk the Hulking name?
I was in Chicago and I was doing improv, and I really got such an amazing lesson there. Like I got to work with some of the greats. And when I moved to New York, the comedy scene just wasn't what I thought it would be. And I always wanted to do music. So I did that music. So I started creating the music. I needed a name. I didn't really have anything. And one morning I woke up and just the name Skulk the Hulking popped into my head. And I was like, what a great way to describe, like, because the Skulk persona is this kind of futility of trying to do good, but messing up a lot and having to learn from those lessons. And so I was like, what a funny idea of like how can something hulking be able to skulk and sneak, like it seems like it's almost impossible. And so I kind of when I said it in my head, I said it out loud and I was just like, I think it really fits the idea behind the whole idea.
Yeah, it's unique and it somehow visually fits. I've not made the time to get completely familiar with the story that you've been
Hmm.
developing, but it'll
Yeah,
give
yeah,
me something to kind of go relook at
for
and look
sure.
at it that way. And so there's a character aspect of it as well.
Hmm.
Was there particular inspiration for that?
So yeah, definitely. Skulk was very much like when I started writing music and I saw it as that way to like get out those frustrations I had with what was happening, especially in America. And I always, coming from that improv world, I used to love to have characters on stage. Originally, like in the Skulk world, there's Lady Baghead, and she kind of represents like government and just the overlooking, all knowledgeable, you know, thoughts that rule our day-to-day lives. And she started from, I was really in love with Magritte's The Lovers painting. I love Magritte. And I had two friends dress up as that painting and just sit behind us during a performance, and they just maintained that pose for the 30-minute show that we did. And slowly, she started showing up in music videos that we were doing. Same thing with Hammer Hands, same things with Camel Man. Camel Man was a buddy of mine who put on a camel mask and wore his whitey tighties and used to pull out lollipops from his underwear and hand it out to audience. They all kind of started from just these thoughts, but slowly I started to realize I was putting meaning on them, and I thought it was just a good place. There always was a story, and people always were like, "What's the story?" Just as you're asking. So I thought, why not put a full story together? And now I've enjoyed it so much that I'm kind of continuing, especially with Skulk always dying and being spit back out by Earth. You get to kind of tell stories from different moments or different lessons. And you learn the lesson through Skulk not learning the lesson until it's too late.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like the from the improv part of it that contributed to the character both as something that was a backdrop, but was it also, am I hearing that it was actually also maybe a little bit part of the improv scene, the immediate scene that you were part of?
So definitely, I feel when I was in the improv scene, I was there for it was right after Del Close had started Improv Olympic in Chicago. And I started improv maybe 5 years after he passed away. And so I got to train under those people who learned directly from Del and really were the ones who were turning it into an art form, you know, and they were very much about creating worlds and continuing to dig deeper into what you're finding. And I always loved that. And I was like, that applies to all art forms, you know, and I just kind of pulled that with me. And I wanted everyone to be a part of that at the shows and experience that together.
Talk a little bit more about how the music of the 90s or any other eras that you appreciate kind of help with the comedy improv aspect to sort of form this combination.
I think it's so funny because like I never really put those two together, but just you asking that makes me realize a bit like 90s was that, especially that 90s, what would they call it? Like not grind, but like the even the new metal, which everyone loves to hate on, you know. There was some very unique. I look towards probably my favorite band from that era, System of a Down. You know, they were more towards the end, but they really they really taught me like how goofy System of a Down can be, but also still in the exact same song, they're talking about very serious things, problems in the world, problems in America. And I realized they were making it more palatable. They were making people learn things by making them have fun. And I think I really wanted to bring that along with me as well. I I also think there was this nice acceptance of different styles. Like everyone was okay with each other in the 90s. I feel like music, I'm talking about musically, you know, we definitely still had problems socially.
Yeah, yeah.
But uh it was so nice to like come home, turn on TRL and see like what's considered the pop of the time. And you have, you know, you have grunge, you have new metal, you have boy bands, you have Britney Spears, you have Latin music, you have rap, you know, and it was all together, all one right after another. And I that's part of music that I love too, is exploring different unknown or unexpected forms of music and seeing how they fit with other forms of music. Because there is a lot of overlap in many musics that weren't necessarily from the same place or time.
Right. I often have to have this pointed out to me by some, really thoughtful, masterful musician who just happens to like bring it to my attention because I will miss a lot of those commonalities, or at least some of the ones that aren't blatantly obvious, right? But
Hmm.
that's interesting. So you kind of did this for me when we first started talking, but for people who discover you for the first time, how would you describe what Skulk the Hulking actually is?
I would say Skulk the Hulking is first and foremost performance art. Uh, I even though now it is a character in a vodcast that I've created, Skulk is kind of many things. It's the music, it's the character, it's in all of us. Skulk is that frustration that we have with things that don't feel right, and it's our ability to laugh at our inability to manage it well. Because a lot of times we don't. uh, but more specifically, I guess it's a mix of music that is a mix of hip hop, metal, and pop, and the character is this ever reoccurring beast that has to try and do what the world wants it to do, even though he's not equipped to do it.
Right. And I assumed that the AI aspect of what you're doing with Hulk the Skulking is largely limited to the visual aspect. Has it crept into the music aspect, or are you still kind of doing music in a more traditional way as you had before?
Yeah, right now the only AI is the visual. Like I actually I'm what's so funny is how opinionated I am about the visual AI, generative AI, which there is a lot of backlash for. I don't necessarily have an opinion on even written generative AI or music generative AI. I haven't explored it at all, and so I don't think it's fair for me to have an opinion on it necessarily, until I do possibly at one point explore it. Uh, it's possible that I don't feel so bad about the generative AI from a visual standpoint, is that I've never considered myself a visual artist. You know, I view it as a tool that helps me be the storyteller that I am, that helps me give a venue for my music that I love creating. Uh, but I've never felt compelled to be a visual artist
Right. Until now.
until now. And what's funny is it's teaching me, by doing this generative AI experiment, it's taught me there is an artistry to it. There is a conversation you have to have with the AI, which is informed by all of us, you know? So it is this kind of conversation you're having with the rest of the world and with the rest of how other people visualize the things you're describing, which I didn't expect when I first went into this. It's made me rethink what words I use. It's made me rethink what words mean to me.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's really it's changed me. It's kind of interesting to see how I view what I'm putting out even.
Yeah, I could see that. Paint us a picture. Did you do live shows before?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so can you paint a picture of like then and now?
When I was doing live shows, I will say I'm not the biggest fan of New York as a venue for live shows.
Okay.
Everyone is involved in other things, and it's so hard to get everyone pushing in the same direction. You know, everyone who was part of the live performances had their own things they were working on. And in some ways that's great and they're bringing in new stuff, but also it's all on you because this is your project and we have other projects that we are working on ourselves.
Hmm.
And I don't, coming from the improv scene in Chicago, where when you were a team, you lived and died together. You hung out 5 days a week, you know, like you were a unit. This felt more, you're, you know, Voltron. You're pulling together a bunch of different things. And don't get me wrong, it does have a ton of benefits. And man, I am so thankful for the guys I worked with. They're phenomenal. And I continue to work with on some of the music aspects of this. Skulk shows back then were, if you show up to a Skulk show, I usually, if you show up early enough for me to be warming up on stage, I'm probably warming up with some Tom Jones or something very unexpected from Skulk, just to keep people like, what is about to happen, you know? And then we usually had performance artists on stage. Like I said, we had like the Lovers in the background one time. Camel Man's running through the audience handing out popsicles. We had Lady Baghead show up and, you know, do a performance piece in the middle of a song. I also am someone who I grew up very loud from a loud family, and most venues in New York don't have the best sound system, so I can usually scream louder than a lot of these venues. So I loved just dropping the mic, getting into the audience, and screaming together with people. And it was very much, a lot of times I would start shows by saying, I am not Skulk, we are not Skulk, but all of us are Skulk. And we're gonna get through this together. And I miss performing. It was, you know, COVID really had stopped it and people moved away and things changed, you know, lives changed. New York lost a lot of really great venues it feels like New York is either venues that are really far out or really gigantic. And so I don't know, the scene changed a little, and so I'm not quite sure how to get back to that if I want to get back to that. Now Skulk is I one of the best things I did was I bought a whisper room right before the pandemic happened. I have my keyboard right here next to me at my desk. I will choose either to work on music or to work on a story. I don't like to write music that is based on the story or vice versa. I like to write the music based on whatever it is that I'm feeling at that moment and write the story based on whatever it is I'm feeling at that moment. And then I have, logs of both and I find where they intersect.
Hmm.
And then I pull those two together and then I start doing like all the bells and whistles on either side of it so that they do influence each other, but the initial emotions were coming from somewhere in me first before I'm trying to manufacture that emotion or story.
Okay. And by whisper room, do you mean like vocal booth or
Yeah, it's a vote. Yeah,
okay.
it's kind of the IKEA of vocal booths, but
Okay.
it's really good. Like it's one type of nut. It fits together perfectly. You just get out your screwdriver and screw it together, and it pretty much fits like one and a half of me. And but it's great for New York living because there's always sounds outside your window and
Yeah.
it's very silent. I'm also, as I said, a very loud screamer, and when I'm in there screaming, at best, it is really just a very low whisper if you're outside of the booth,
Oh, that's cool.
So it's really been uh kind of a godsend that I accidentally bought right before the pandemic hit, and it allowed me to explore like writing this podcast or vodcast and recording it all on my own.
By the way, is the video podcast also available in audio only format or is it
Yeah,
exclusive?
so Spotify, you can choose to listen to just the audio or you can watch and listen. uh I mean, on YouTube it's video, but
So,
but there is an RSS feed to that.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Is it going to be a limited series thing or undetermined?
So this story was 12 episodes, and it is kind of a few lives of Skulk that are all related to each other and tell one big story. But I also, before I did it and now after it's a continued series of shorts that are anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes, and they kind of are a quick life and lesson of Skulk from a random, point. It could be before this longer story that happened or after this longer story, just to teach whatever moral lesson Skulk needed to learn at that moment.
Okay. And has this iteration extended into live performance or will it?
I would love it to. As I said, I really do miss live performing. There is nothing that beats the fear of getting on stage, and the the connection that you make with the audience. I would love for this to. I mean, that would be really cool to turn it into a live performance. Maybe more like this thing to turn into a more theatrical thing instead of a music venue thing.
Hmm.
There would be obviously music involved, but uh, I think it would be best served in a more theatrical
Yeah,
venue.
that makes sense. Or, I mean, kind of end up with that Pink Floyd, the Wallish sort of production
Yeah,
thing. It's still
and that's
music,
I
but
mean I've always loved that. Like you look at Pink Floyd, you look at like old, like I love like watching like old Alice Cooper stuff that was like super performance art, like
hmm.
that's you would I don't even know if you could call it a music video. It was just kind of this weird performance stuff that they were doing. Uh I've always liked the things that kind of blend genres and make people question what exactly it is they're watching.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me, and I've lost a lot of the details, and a lot of these are like a haze of weed and beer from my youth. But I saw I saw Alice Cooper in Dallas once, and they performed behind a chain link fence.
I love it, man. You know, you don't even have to know what it means. It means something to everyone in the audience, and that's the important thing.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's actually something learned that I learned through improv. Sometimes it's good to just repeat something, even if you're not quite sure why you're repeating it, because that repetition lets the audience find something out about themselves. You
Mm,
know,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have to always know the reason, but you have to always present something that makes people think about what they're doing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a little too I don't know. Sometimes
Well,
I question the things I learned in improv, but I do it helped open me up as a person. So
well,
I
I
don't
think
think
I guess it speaks to the fact that we experience music or visual art the way we experience it, and so something may have meaning to Alice Cooper or to you, but it just sort of gets taken in, it may get taken in a completely different way, especially if it's not sort of predefined for us, and you're
for
just
sure.
surprised, which I was, at that time in that particular instance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my first concert was what's their name, Rammstein, and it
yeah.
was early 90s, and my parents' friend had taken me to go see that, and he did not know what he was in store for, and I did not know what I was in store for,
Oh, wow.
and I just all of it was just so intense to me, but I love that, like, it made me feel like, oh man, you could really just go for it if you want, you know?
Sure. Yeah, be imaginative for
Yeah.
sure. So, hey, I want going back to something you said earlier about,
Mhm.
or I was asking you about the whole PR thing,
Yes.
and you mentioned resistance to the generative AI aspect of the podcast. Can you share any specifics as to what the resistance
So a
sounds like?
lot. So we were really reaching out to get some write-ups from media outlets who normally talk about vodcasts and podcasts. And we were really pushing, I really don't think there's many vodcasts specifically that are fictional. Most of them are talking heads, and it's people who are talking. And, I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that's what most of them are. And we were really trying to show, like, hey, look, there might be a new way to look at vodcasts, almost as a way to produce your own show in a unique way.
Hmm.
And we got a lot of responses of just flat out people said, thanks for reaching out to us. And we just don't write about generative AI right now. And that's we got it from a lot of people, and we tried downplaying it a little bit and speaking more towards, because it's the whole project isn't generative AI, it's just a tool used in the entire project. We tried also trying to explain to him that part of the reason of this project was that I wanted to explore it as something that, is there moral value to it, is there artistic value to it, is it as taking from others as people make it out to be. I find it a little disappointing how media doesn't want to talk about. I understand being concerned about it, but not wanting to talk about something that you find concerning that is very prevalent in your arts that you are commenting about, I think it's a little naive too. You know, I think if you're not willing to talk about something that you think is going wrong, you're just allowing the people who are doing it wrong to continue to do it wrong and teach others how to do it wrong. So why
Sure.
wouldn't you want to talk about it and ask yourself too, is there something valuable that could come out of this?
What
But
was
it's
the?
hard to fight against it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just sort of thinking about all the things that go through people's heads. Some of these publications and maybe like they probably misunderstand. Well, it sounds clearly misunderstand what you're doing, but I can see they still have reasons, good or bad, why they shy
Yeah.
away from it. So, is it fair to say, and I'm not sure that it is, but or maybe let me rephrase it. Was this iteration of Skulk the Hulking born of generative AI, or had these visions kind of been going through your head for a long time, and generative AI enabled you to bring them to fruition?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely the latter. Like I had been having these creating these characters for a while live with people, performing and being these characters. And once I saw what generative AI could do, I thought, oh, maybe this is a chance to really bring them to life and help people understand, with a goal of, if someone, if this, to show what it could be. And then once people see what it could be, and I have more, funds to be able to create something that isn't necessarily AI driven, I can do that. But also too, using the AI, it kind of taught, that was the initial goal, but now having used the I sometimes question if I want to move away from it, because there's so many times in the words and the phrases that I use to create some of these images, it pulls something that I didn't even realize I had meaning in there. And it kind of, I also have always loved the ugliness of the AI, like when something doesn't go as planned. I almost prefer it when it does that, and finding how to use that to help tell my story. It's kind of a collaborator in a
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm. Accidental.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. And was any of this born out of places outside of improv? Like, what was feeding your imagination for the visual aspects and even the story aspects before improv?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've always been a political person, even when I was a kid. I went to college for physics and philosophy, and though I was more into physics at the time, the philosophy had kind of grabbed me more and made me think about things. And I think definitely some like early images of characters pulling the strings come from philosophers Nietzsche and David Hume, who I loved. And they kind of taught me how the world works, even though I think they're both of them are very wrong about a lot of things, but I like the way that they painted the world with their words. And so that kind of started getting me thinking about that. I mean, as I met, Lady Baghead definitely comes from Magritte's The Lovers, but Hammerhands, I kind of like to look at the images as they have these grandiose ideas behind them, but I like to put the images in almost a childlike way. When I was thinking what could represent enforcement of law, everyone's got the police outfit, the whatever, but I was like, how can I make that almost a child cartoon character, and just give him hammers for hands? And that's his mouth is sewn shut and he has hammers for hands, so it's the only way he can enforce this law is through using those hammers. And Camel Man is definitely a bit of a reference to the old school Joe Camel, and how we use characters to entice people to be. He represents addiction and a want to only entertain yourself. Uh, and so it kind of, merged into there, and just, a gangly, heroined out looking creature. Um, so yeah, I like trying to make bigger ideas into these more childlike characters, because that I feel that kind of appeals to the masses in some ways.
If I were to try and get you to dig back farther in your life, is
Mhm.
there like any childhood animation or television that informs your imagination for these kind of things as well?
It's interesting. I mean, growing up, I remember one of the first things cartoon wise that maybe grabbed me was on MTV. There was cartoon sushi, also liquid television. It was before, like, liquid television existed right before cartoon sushi.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I loved how it had each thing was a short, each thing was in such a different form and visualization, but they all kind of aimed at the weird and not so talked about things in life in some ways. And I remember that having an impact, like I really love that. MTV had a huge impact on me. I mean, Aeon Flux was on there. That was such a crazy and weird visualization. Um, but I think also that it's possible that part of what I like about this project is that I'm constantly changing the style. Sometimes it's a cartoon style, and then the next scene is a more realistic style, and then the next scene is, almost a painting, Uh, it's possible that came from that cartoon sushi liquid television, style where it was jumping genres so often, but still kind of telling similar stories. So there was a weird through line.
That's interesting. You reminded me of kind of a modern day version of this. There's I may get the name wrong because I always do, but and I don't recall how many seasons they initially had, but there was a long gap. I thought it was completely done, but I believe it's called Love, Death, and Robots. Have you seen this?
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I that's we're in the middle of watching the latest season right now. Like, it's
Yeah,
that's a wonderful show, and I think Love, Death, and Robots does a great job of kind of calling back to those cartoon sushi liquid television days where
right.
it's the whole goal of it. I think that's also what I loved about it. Both Love, Death, and Robots and those old shows, their goal was to give people who weren't so popular or famous an outlet to show the art that they're doing. So I really appreciate all of them. And yeah, I think associating Love, Death, and Robots is very on point.
Yeah, and I'm sure there were probably a couple other programs older ones, kind of going back more around the MTV time that you're talking about that are lurking in the back of my memory too. But that one jumped out at me because it has kind of this similar thread, but visually and topically, it really kind of moves around in a pleasantly surprising way,
Yeah,
and dystopian dark way, which is appealing.
of course, always.
So I imagine some listeners who find the episode that we'll create from this conversation are going to be curious about what AI tools you're using and how you learned to harness their quirks.
hmm so the initial project started with Mid-Journey.
Okay.
Which I started on when it was only on Discord. There wasn't even a way to do it on the web. And eventually it got moved over where you can do it just from a website. Uh, Mid-Journey is very much about the words that you use. Mid-Journey I use to create the images. And Midjourney bases a lot of what's important as what's at the front of what you're typing is more important than what's at the back of what you're typing. And so a lot of times it's not the best idea to write it as a sentence, but start by describing what the most important thing is and then slowly describe the next least important thing. Midjourney has changed a lot in the few years that I've been working with it. Now there's a tool where you can highlight a segment of the image you create and ask it to change it in a certain way.
That's cool.
So now there's actual editing that is involved. And I really like that. That's really started to like let you feel a little more control, because there was a lot of times something would an image would pop up and you'd be like, oh man, that's perfect, except one little thing doesn't fit the story. Now you're able to kind of change that and move with it.
That's cool.
uh and now recently, with my recent stories that are coming out, i've 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 started playing with Sora, which is ChatGPT's video generator. And I love using Midjourney and Sora together. Midjourney is so good at creating these very visceral pictures that like you really can like get some good emotions out of the characters on the screen, which allows Sora to pick up that emotion from the images. And then you kind of describe what you want it to do in Sora, and then it'll animate it. I've noticed Sora is a lot more careful about what it's willing to give you. A lot of images that I was able to get out of Midjourney in Sora, it says this might violate our what's the word I'm looking for? This might violate
Code
our
of something.
code of some, yeah, exactly. Sora is a lot more careful about it. But something very fun about that is that I actually, my favorite part of art is overcoming obstacles. So it's very careful about showing dead bodies. And Skulk accidentally kills a lot of people and things in his story. He's very sorry about it, but he's an ogre. Uh, so you have to find clever ways to represent that. You can't show something, but sometimes a mannequin floating in a bog with its body parts separated gets the idea across. I've always felt art comes from the obstacles you have to overcome.
Yeah.
And I actually found, when I went from writing, I used to write a lot of my music on, sorry, I'm a little bouncing all over the place.
It's all right.
Like, I used to find writing my music, I used to write on a sequencer, an
Okay.
old sequencer from the 70s that I bought like in the 2000s. Um, but I loved it because there weren't tons of sounds, and it really like you had to make what it had work. And then I started writing on Logic Pro, and my God, there are so many sounds on Logic Pro that it felt there were no obstacles.
So let me
And
stop you for
I,
a second
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
that part
yeah.
because I'm a Logic user. Is that out of the box or with like plugin a lot of plugins?
Even just out of the box, I
Okay.
would say actually it's shocking how many sounds it has. And then you can
Nice.
add plugins, which is even more.
Yeah.
So it kind of, when I first started using Logic, it kind of, I had to take a moment and be like, okay, how do I even begin to think about music,
Yeah.
because I'm so used to having these obstacles that now I don't. And so now I have to kind of in music, I have to kind of manufacture obstacles to help me write. Sometimes I'll hear a sound and I'll be like, I'll just go through the sounds just down and just hit one note, and I'll be like, I like this sound. I have to write something with it. And so you just kind of lock yourself in and force it. Now, sometimes you don't write something, but having that obstacle of forcing helped me learn to write with Logic.
That's interesting.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. Do you find that in your art that?
Well, so, I mean, I actually have an experience kind of that you reminded me of. So I've only published a couple of original compositions, and I
Mhm.
have pieces of things, that I haven't finished. But my work with Logic has been recording acoustic drum sets for
Okay.
for production, and then also vocal parts. And I use it for editing the podcast. So I've occasionally put some things in there. Oh, and I did do a short series of videos where I would play to loops that I got from Logic.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, if I were just to talk about the loops library, it's massive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
It's
massive.
it's shocking how much we have at our fingertips right now, and it actually is, I feel, a little stifling in certain ways.
Yeah.
Uh, I do, and I do use Logic to edit all of same the podcast stories. I That's where I edit in Logic, and then when I put it together for visuals, I actually just use iMovie. I find iMovie has everything
Talk
that.
about obstacles, though. I
Yeah,
keep learning.
exactly.
I keep learning new workarounds for things.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I love them.
I know that Final Cut Pro, as amazing as it probably is, I'm like, I will just be overwhelmed with all the stuff it does. I'm not sure I'm prepared.
100%. I use GIMP when I want to edit,
I've
like
used it, yeah.
I do kind of like those obstacles that, because when there is this obstacle and you're trying to figure out how to even just get around it, a lot of times you figure out ways to break it in fun and interesting ways, which ends up becoming your flavor. That's kind of where you get the spice inside of where your art comes from,
Yeah,
at least for me.
sure. And I started down a thought and I didn't quite finish it, but I
Yeah,
kind of want to share it. It helps me plug a song, but
yeah. Do
um, you talked about finding something you love the sound, you want to write something around it. That happened to me with the second song I published.
Mhm.
I happened to have I found this website called Compose with a K and a Z,
Okay.
and it's an online collaboration platform for musicians. So people put in stems of something they're working on and invite drummers or guitarists or vocalists or whatever they need. And I found this guy who was writing so much stuff, but I found this keyboard piece he'd done fully complete.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, that sounds like a cool kind of prog rock thing. I'm gonna see if and I put some drums to it and sent it to him. He liked it, but then I said, hey, can I use that to write a song around? And we can collaborate on it. We'll be the writers of the song. And he was like, sure. So to your point, I found this sound that I just loved, and basically it was amenable to it. I had him shorten it, rearrange a couple pieces, and we ended up with a song that wasn't crazy long, and it was
Yeah.
my ode to prog rock and groups like Zeppelin and Genesis.
Nice, nice.
But I could see that if you develop a skill for exploring like a sound library and saying, oh yeah, I like that one. I'm gonna tuck that one away because I want to use that. And that's what I guess that's what I did with those drum videos I mentioned. I'd find a loop and go, that's a good one. Let's see what I can do with that.
Yeah, and there's something nice about like having those. Like I just have a folder of just sounds that I turned into little, maybe it's only just 4 bars, 8 bars, maybe it's half a song, but like as far as I can take the idea that that sound inspired me, and I just got this nice folder, and every so often I'll just go through it and re-listen to stuff because it might spark something.
Hmm.
And now, especially when I've written a story and I know what I want to say, and I'll record the vocals so I kind of have the feel of what that story is. And then you just go through that library and like, does this song match its energy? And then I find that matched energy, and when you throw them together, that's when you actually kind of finish both sides. Like each side is not quite there, but then they kind of influence each other, and you see where the overlap is and where they need to support each other.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
I'm very much someone who, I prefer to let the music drive. I will elongate parts of episodes or shrink parts of episodes to fit where the music has to change, because I think that's more important. I
That's
think the
cool.
music is what gets us to feel, whereas the story is what gives it the flavor.
That's interesting, and I think it's kind of cool. Like it's the musician in you.
I think so. I've always, since I was a kid, I loved music, and that's always, I feel, what I've led with.
Me too. Me too. So you mentioned Discord and the early days of Midjourney and Discord.
Mhm.
Two questions popped in my head. It's like, do you lean on user communities for learning things, or is everybody showing kind of like everything else? Some YouTube, some great 8-year-old produced YouTube videos showing you how to do some of the things you're trying to figure out. And and as someone who like knows of Discord, I was just on it the other day, but I
Mhm.
never use it. It sort of reminds me of Reddit. I've never really gotten in there, and there are things about like Reddit that piss me off that don't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Is that a tool that is used for as a community tool for the tools, the AI generative tools that you're using, or how do you learn?
So that's actually interesting because I feel Midjourney changed when it came off of Discord. Because the
Okay.
way Midjourney used to work was they have, I think it was 4 rooms, maybe 6 rooms, where you could generate images, but everyone is in there generating images. So you're not just seeing your images you're generating, you're seeing everyone's images. And that has to affect how you are creating. You're seeing everything. Uh, it is a lot of people just putting in a picture of themselves and making them look like a ninja or something. But every so often you'd see something, you're like, that's kind of cool. And you could see what prompt they used to get that,
I
you
see.
know? So I think there was some very interesting learning opportunities. Now that it's web-based, I actually don't even know if you can still go on Discord to use those rooms. I should look. That's I don't know why I just chose to start. It was partially
There's only
when
so
it's
much time.
I mean, that's the thing. It was also distracting and it was hard to stay focused. Whereas when it's just your stuff you're working on, it's a
Mm,
little bit easier
sure.
to get it done. But also too, I do miss that community aspect where I was seeing what people were creating. When it came to learning the quirks of it, Reddit was a little more helpful. The
Okay.
Discord did have the Discord I did use the Discord rooms that were like people could talk about what they used, what they noticed was working for them, what wasn't working for them. But still Reddit I think is just a little cleaner. You were able to ask a question and kind of get there, yeah, through that. Uh I think but that also makes me think a little about how I feel there's part of the modern world that is moving away from social media. Social media isn't quite social media anymore. The social part is disappearing.
Mm,
People like, I look at Instagram, I look at TikTok, and it's you putting out something to show the world, but not having a conversation with the world. Whereas early Facebook, there were conversations. Even now, I try to talk about AI on Facebook because it's the only place you could post something with more than 140 characters,
right.
Um, but I miss that social aspect, and I think early on part of what made Midjourney successful was it had that social aspect. People were seeing each other's work, commenting on it, talking about it. I don't know if it's had an effect because I feel I'm not part of that social part of Discord anymore. Really, Discord now I use as I have my own channel for like people who follow the podcast or who, watch the Twitch shows that I've done. But that's mostly what I'm using Discord for these days. And Discord is able to do a lot that I have not explored. There's so much to explore these days. It's hard to explore it all.
So it is still relevant then, and also, do you like what it does for, or at least the potential of what it does for your podcast community?
Yes, I do think Discord is useful, and I think it is a more social. It's probably the most social media uh place that exists right now.
That's so
I
fascinating.
yeah. Uh Again, it is a little more closed than other social
Sure.
medias because you have to be invited or asked to be invited to a channel.
Okay.
Um, but I do get a lot more interaction there. I'm able to talk to people, people who, as I've said, people who've listened to the show or whatever, and I'm able to create mini channels inside of my Discord where we can focus the conversations on different things. I have one channel that's just, what's music videos and new music that's inspiring you. I have one channel that's just talking about gaming because some people are big gamers in the community, you know. So like I'm able to kind of point people to where they might want to talk about stuff that's Skulk adjacent or Skulk, you know, Skulk in those worlds.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do like Discord. I think it is doing the work of social media that is missing.
Hmm.
I do think we need more of it,
Okay, good to know. That was a self-serving set of questions in
though.
case you couldn't
Fair.
tell, but
No, no, it's good.
um, so it sounds like you're a gamer. I was curious or wanted to at least tell you that believe it's the last episode I had a.
I listened to it, yeah.
Okay, what do you think? I'm curious if other listeners will like it.
I thought it was very informative. It was very interesting, very
Cool.
cool to hear someone moving from music to doing music gaming. It's actually something people have pushed me towards because my music can be a little 16-bit at times. Uh and even though gaming music is no longer 16-bit, you know, like I kind of miss those days. I find myself sometimes just doing a menial project and I start humming some song from Zelda or some song from Metroid or something, you know. Those musics had such an effect on me as a kid, and I think it was this like it used the most basics of sounds but created these feelings and worlds, you know. But it was very interesting. I thought it was very cool to hear how he moved into writing game music and kind of what the feel is of small gaming companies versus larger gaming companies. That's something that I think in the gaming community, like how he talked about how the gaming community does get a little frustrated with the larger companies because they put out unfinished stuff so
Sure.
often, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
No, but I thought that was I really enjoyed listening to that
Oh, good.
episode.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He'd been on the podcast before, but and it was before he was in that industry. And you know, his story actually is parallel to yours too. I mean, it was born of the pandemic.
Hmm.
That change, that shift, and
It was a changing event. Like
yeah,
I think a lot of people's moment of change might have been that late 2019, early 2020.
yeah, I think so. And I think some are still trying to figure out what the hell they should be doing now. They got hit by the wake, but um, you know, didn't necessarily come out of it with an idea. And
Yeah,
not that everyone's idea is gonna pan out. But you know, you got to try it long enough to see, and hopefully have fun doing it regardless.
yeah, yeah.
So for independent artists who are like intimidated by AI, and I have really mixed feelings about it, and I'm a user of it. Obviously, I don't know if that's obvious or not, but or people, independent artists who see it as a threat, and I get that, and I'm sure you do too. But what would you tell them?
I would say there's always been changing of tools that we use, and unfortunately, that means we constantly have to change our skill sets, you know.
Yeah,
um I think the idea of I think one of the big fears is that it's stealing other people's art, you know. And I certainly don't think that we should be stealing other people's art, but I think our definition of what stealing art is a little skewed right now. Yes, we shouldn't exact copy other artists, but all of our art comes from other art that we've experienced, you know.
hmm,
It's just AI is faster about it, which is scary and frustrating, you know, as a human who can't move that fast. But I don't think it makes it not invalid, you know. Art comes from the meaning you put behind the brushstrokes, not necessarily the brushstrokes itself. And AI is just a brushstroke, in my opinion. You know, I love there was recently this like 10-minute video of uh uh a 10-minute video that was like a movie trailer, and people were like, AI's gonna take over making movies. There was not a single thing that seemed like a story in that entire 10 minutes. It was just colors flashing across a screen. You know, to have meaning, I think is human. You
Yeah.
know, like I don't think AI is ever going to be able to recreate meaning. Now, if your art is just recreating something that's already been done, well, then I don't know, maybe question why that's your art a little bit, and I'm not saying that's not even valid, but there will always be a place for that, and there will always be a place for new and innovative technologies. The oppression and the exploitation that people are worried about has more to do with people with way too much money and way too much time who are trying to exploit and oppress people, and they will find another tool even if you're able to kill AI art. So focus that energy against stopping those people. You know,
Yeah.
that's my opinion. I don't know, and I'm open to hearing other. I do think AI does bring up good questions about ecology, and definitely data centers are pulling more and more energy, which is something we need to think about. Um, at the same time, there are. I read an article by a professor, I believe from Princeton, who he was talking about how usually with any technology, there is a huge bump in energy use, but then we figure out how to do it with a lot less energy, just like DeepSeek, which is the new chat GPT, which uses 95% less energy. I get the feeling something's going to come along. He's like, usually that's what happens. And then there's a big drop in how much energy it takes, which then is also countered by more people using it. That is part of being human and working with your world and knowing we do have to take care of our world. And that would be my main concern with any generative AI. That's where I would focus my energy and worries about generative AI. And I don't know. I guess that's where
It's a
I was
deep
going with
question,
it.
I realize, yeah.
It is. It
It can.
is.
What creative possibilities would you encourage people to think about?
I think when you go into it, how do you create something that you haven't seen it create? How can you break it? I like to go into tools and think, how can I break it, and how can I use it in a way that it wasn't meant to be used? I
Sure.
feel that can sometimes show an interesting and weird artistic endeavor, and teach you something about both the tool you're using and your art itself, which I think is the most important part of it.
I like that. Man, there's so many things we could we can talk about. Well, tell me what is on the horizon for you. I think that would be kind of cool, so people can, who are inclined to do so, can follow your work and maybe get some inspiration from what you have in the pipeline.
So I'm right now I'm working on a I'm working on these shorts that are using Sora now, and so there will be some new Skulk stories coming out. I am also going to take that big long 12 episode story and turn it into video generated AI, just because something I think we forget about as artists is a lot of times once we put something out, we feel, all right, leave it alone, it's done, it's happened. But if there's something that can make people see it in a new light, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking it and reworking it. One of my favorite, I'm not a big anime person, but I've always appreciated Neon Genesis Evangelion. Are you familiar with
No,
that at all?
no.
The creator put it out first in 16 stories, and it was an anime. Then he retold the story as a manga, a comic book, and then he told it again in a 4-part movie series. And each one taught me something new about that story and kind of made me see the story in an interesting light. I didn't feel cheated that he retold the story. He added enough to it that it became something new.
He remixed it.
Yeah, it's a remix. We've loved remixes all our lives, you know?
Some of us do.
Yes, exactly. I mean, remixes have been a part of art forever, you know? So I think I think so that's really what I'm focused on right now. I would hope in the future to I'm going to start submitting to film festivals. It's nice to see that some film festivals are accepting AI as a category. So that's one of the focuses. And man, long term, I would love to make it an actual, possible Netflix series, or even people have been like, it would make an awesome video game, you know,
Yeah.
to bring it back to talking about video games. But uh, and new music, I do, I feel the need for it. This allows me to create new music. It's helping me see music in different ways that I didn't see back when I was only doing music. My music was aggressive back then. And now with the stories, sometimes you need softer moments. Sometimes you need, and it's making me explore new avenues of music. So I'm excited to see where my music as a whole goes with this.
That's very cool. Well, best of luck with all the new stuff you're thinking of and the current project you're working on. And I'll check out the podcast. Great talking with you. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. And yeah, great talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rabanzo. Thank you for having me on the show, man. I had a great time.
You got it. As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, rabanzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy and super appreciated. You'll find many ways of showing your support there, including through our affiliate partners like Bandzoogle, Kit, Email, formerly ConvertKit, DreamHost, and others. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it, or buy it at rabanzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.